All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning's share. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Elul, Baruch Mary Rina Duman, for dedicating all of Shimon and Drushos this month in honor of their children and all of the suburban sons and daughters beginning their year of study in Eretz Yisrael. May their Torah study and mitzvos in the Holy Land merit the release of our precious hostages, the success of our soldiers, and return to their families in the arrival of Mashiach Tzidkinu Mehira B'Yameinu. Amen. But with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Pei Zayin 87. We are picking up on Pei Vav Amud Beis 86b, 6 lines up from the bottom. Tashma im Haisa Mida Shel Echad Mehem Rishon Kana. So we'll say, remember again, continuing along in the sugya over here, about in the midst of a transaction, at what point in time does one go ahead and actively acquire the item that they are purchasing? So the Gemara says over here, if the measuring utensil belonged to one of the individuals, then Rishon Kana, whoever owns the utensil owns the merchandise as it is being measured out. And even though, again, the measurement has not been completed, and I can also say the logic, of course, is obvious. Since it's being measured out with someone's specifically owned utensil, therefore, halacha l'maaseh belongs to that individual even before the measure is complete. So the Gemara says, Kigon da'amarlei. So what's this case? How do we qualify this case? Kigon da'amarlei, hin b'shneim asar sloim, lug b'sela. So a good way to illustrate this case would be a situation where, let's say, Ruvain's selling to Shimon, and he tells him, I'm selling you 12 sloim of whatever, 12 slum of wheat, and each lug, or 12 slum of wine, each lug is worth a selah. Remember again, we saw this at the end of yesterday's daf, that when you structure a transaction like that, right, there are two ways to structure a transaction. You could say, I'm selling you 12 slum, right, I'm selling you a hin. I'm selling you a hin. A hin is a measurement. I'm selling you one hin for 12 slums. So if you were to just say that, then remember again, at what point is the transaction complete? After the full hin has been measured out. On the other end, if you say, I'm selling you a hin for 12 slime, but each lug is worth a selah, then we pointed out in yesterday's daf that halacha l'maisa, the acquisition takes place at every lug, right? Since the larger transaction was broken down into smaller components, then halacha l'maisa, the acquisition takes place at each of those smaller intervals as well. The Gemara says, Rav Kahana, shnasos hayu behin. So Rav Kahana says, well, so it's actually very beautiful. In the Beis Hamikdash, they had a measurement, a utensil that was the size of a hin. What they would do is, in that utensil, they had notches that indicated, again, like the individual smaller measurements that led up to the hin. So the Gemara suggests over here, hachanami shnasos hayu bemidos. That it's possible over here that in the case that we were dealing with over here, the utensil that was used for purposes of measuring also had notches, so that the individual smaller amounts were clear as the transaction was unfolding. Okay, Tashma. So I'll say the point to remember in this, because this is the point the Gemara keeps on reinforcing, is that halacha l'maisa, when selling merchandise, so the question is, at what point in time does the buyer acquire the merchandise? So as we're beginning to see, that's really dependent on a variety of different things. It could be dependent, number one, in terms of where the transaction is occurring. Number two, what is the produce being put into? Number three, how is the transaction itself actually formulated, right? Is the transaction formulated as I'm selling you a hin for 12 slaim, right? Or I'm selling you a hin for 12 slaim, ultimately each what was Lashon over here? Each lug for a selah. So again, that could also make the difference is the buyer acquiring it all at once it's fully measured out, or is he acquiring the produce incrementally? So that's the point the Gemara keep on trying to make for us. And of course, the backdrop to all of this, what else is the backdrop to all of this? The backdrop to all of this is minhag makom, that ultimately whatever is the common practice of the local marketplace, that's what governs everything as well. So a lot of different things happening over here. So let's go back to Tashma. I'll say last last line on 86b. Tashma, hasocher es hapa'al lasos imo legoren hayom bedinar. So this is a fascinating case. I hire a worker. Now, let's assume for a moment that I'm hiring an agricultural worker. So he's going to be working the fields. Now, bepashtos, when he's going to work the fields, let's assume that agricultural work in the field begins after Pesach. After Pesach, I'm hiring him though now. I'm hiring now. So again, it's Elul. I'm hiring him in Elul to be able to work for me in Nisan. Now, interestingly enough, how am I doing this? So if you take a look at the last Rashbam, the last three Rashbams. Hazochar sapal v'nosin oschara achshav b'nisan kedei lasosim abagoren. Okay, so the Rashbam says ultimately, really what's happening over here is I'm hiring him in Nisan, and he's going to work for me sometime later on in the summer. So what happens? Look at the Rashbam. Hayom b'dinar kilomar kol hayom shel yimos hagoren b'dinar v'nosin lo achshav lam b'dinar l'lam yimei hagoren v'lo gasmi yom. Okay, so watch what's happening over here. So it's Nisan, and I'm hiring Ruvain to be my farmhand, to be my laborer in the fields. I'm hiring him for whatever it is. We'll call it Tammuz. For Tammuz, he's going to work for me in the summer. He's going to gather in all my crops. I hire him for at the rate of 1 dinar a day. 1 dinar a day. So it happens that the Rashbam frames it as, I know that I'm going to need him for 30 days, so I hire him for 30 dinar. Now what's the kunst in this? Listen to this. I pay him now. I give him 30 dinar. Now I'm prepaying you for the 30 days of work you're going to do for me in Tammuz. Okay, here's where it gets interesting. It's interesting now. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Top of Pei Zayin, 87a. V'lagoren yafe sela. Okay, now look at the Rashbam. Scharo sela b'chol yom shebesela hayachol lahaske atzmo aval b'shvil hakdamas hamos ozil gabe. Now, when it comes to Tammuz itself, if Ruvain were to look for work, he could hire himself out at a sela per day. So obviously I hired him at a dinar a day, which is much less. During the actual harvest season, he could find work for 1 sela a day. Now, if he could find work for a sela a day, then why did he accept my dinar proposal? Why? So it's very simple, because what did I do over here? I gave him the money. In other words, so Ruvain needed the money. So what he did is he went ahead and he hired himself out for work during the summer, but I prepaid him. I paid him for work. But because I prepaid him, I got a discount. So now watch this. This is fascinating. So the Gemara says, Asher lichanos himenu. So the halacha is when let's say the summertime comes around and Ruvain goes to work for me, as much as I paid him 40 dinar, I cannot get more than 40 dinar worth of work at the time that he is working. See what's happening over here? So in other words, I prepaid, but I can only get 40 dinars worth of work in accordance with the cost of labor at the time that Reuven is doing the labor. Now, what's the issue over here? Take a look at the Rashbam Aser. This is incredible. Mishum de mechsi ki agar natar li shenosin li zapal selabi mosagoren b'shel dinar shenosan li benisan v'himten al achshav. We'll say, you know why? It looks like ribis. It looks like interest. Why does it look like interest? I'm giving Reuven 40 dinar now. And what is he doing What is he doing for me? He's doing for me actually a service that's worth 40 sela. So what does that look like? It looks like I gave him money now, and because I have to wait for repayment, therefore what? I'm getting more. So now again, is this real ribis? It's not. That's why Rashi calls it agar. And I remember that phraseology from Ezu Neshach. Agar natar means the amount of money you make for waiting for repayment. So since I gave him money early, I have to wait to get my money. Therefore, I'm getting more than I should normally be entitled to. So I'll say this is fascinating. This is fascinating. So therefore, again, the Gemara says I have every right to contract Reuven at a cheaper price and prepay him, but just understand I'm not actually getting a savings. When the harvest season rolls around, I can get 40 dinar worth of work in accordance with the current cost of labor. Incredible. However, so I'll say, but obviously, this is totally not worth it for me, right? In other words, that makes no sense. So I'm not gaining anything from this. So there's a little bit of a workaround. What's the workaround? Aval im sachra mehayom bedinar liyom v'lagorin yafesela mutter. Now, interestingly enough, what I can do is I can say, Ruvain, listen, here's the deal. I'm actually hiring you as of today. I'm hiring you as of today, right? Now again, I'm hiring you starting today to work in my field for harvest season for 40 days. That's what I'm doing. So now what that does, I will say, is what's the difference? The difference is the term of employment started now. Now, Reuven and I might both know that in reality there's nothing really for him to do today, right? And there's going to be nothing until, I don't know, Tammuz. But Lamaisa, as long as I started the employment today, then what? Then halacha Lamaisa, we could honor the terms of the employment and he can go ahead and give me 40 days worth of labor for 40 dinar. What's the distinction between the two cases? In case number one, the work didn't start until Tammuz. In case number two, the work, quote unquote, started today. And because it starts today, therefore, there's no potential issue of agar natar, no potential issue of anything that looks like ribbis. Incredible. Sumar says, okay, what does that have to do with anything that we're talking about over here? So now watch this. Let's go back for just a second. If I say to Reuven, I'm selling you a core, which is a volume, a measure. I'm selling you a core of wheat for 30 selah, and each sa'ah is a selah. So again, if that's the way I structure the sale with Reuven, so therefore if that's the case, Rishon Kanas, what's Talacha? Talacha, so remember again, anytime you structure a case like this, how does it work? Reuven acquires each sa'ah as it's measured out, right? Because remember, if I didn't want Reuven to acquire until the end, then what would I have done? I would have said, Reuven, I'm selling you a core for 30 selah. The fact that I say I'm selling you a core for 30 selah, Sorry, I'm selling you a core. I'm selling you a core for 30 selah. Each sa'ah is one selah, indicates that what? That Reuven is acquiring each sa'ah as it is measured out. So most of the Gemara says, here's the problem. Hachanami, kama mifsak pasak v'astra lahanos mimeno. So we'll say, is this not comparable ultimately again to the case that we just espoused, right? If that's the case and he's acquiring each sa'ah as it's measured out, Asher's measured, and he should be Asher to be Mahana, to get Hana from it. To which the Gemara says, Midinar liyom ulagorin yafes selamotar, amai v'ha agar natar lihu. So I'll say, but again, let's jump back for just a second. Even in the case where I say that each day, and if that case is going to be mutter, then in the case of Medina Liyom Lagorin Yafasela, that each case that you work for me ultimately is going to be a dinner for each day, and for the entire harvest season or for the entire gathering season, Yafasela, that should be mutter. Why should that be mutter? Amai Vaha Agar Natar Lihu. Is that not a case of Agar Natar as well? Are we not running into the same exact situation? Rava says no. You can't really compare it. I'll tell you why. Zilzule b'schirus mi aser. I will say it is common in the workforce to do what? To underpay people. In other words, when it comes to working people, so remember again, it's understood. People have different values. And if somebody is willing to work cheaper, then therefore again, that's something that's understood. So therefore there's no really such thing, I was going to say there's no such thing as undervaluing an employee, but that is not true. That is not true. And has to be very careful not to undervalue their employees. The idea over here is, look at the Rashbam for just a moment. B'tizbra, b'lehave asar, v'chil zalzuli b'schirus mi asar b'tmiya. Is it asar to underpay an employee? ואפילו היכד והקדם לו הדינר מניסן ולא עשי עמו על הגר מדאורייסא שרי דלא דמי לו להלווה ולא למקח וממכר דאספי עונה ביטל מקח דהסם ודאי כימוזל גבי מכתישה. So we'll say the idea over here is, in the workforce it is common to pay people different kinds of wages. So because it's common to pay people different kinds of wages, there's no ribbis issue in this case. Right, the Gemara just going full circle over here. Bless you. There's no ribbis issue in this case because halacha l'maisa, again, it's understood. Some people work for more money, some people work for less money, and therefore, again, in order for it to be ribbis, there has to be some type of baseline established amount. When it comes to payment of employees, there's not a baseline established amount. All right, very interesting. To which the Gemara says, "Ma'ishna reisha or ma'ishna seifa." So I don't understand what is the difference between the reisha and the seifa. To which the Gemara says, "Reisha delo ka'avid behedja." The reisha delo ka'avid behedja mehashta mechseki agar natar. So I'll say something that the Gemara asks. I understand. So if that's the case, that you're telling me that at the end of the day, really it's common for people to overpay and underpay workers. So I'll say what that means is as follows. Even during the harvest season itself, well, let's say as we said before, a worker would be paid a sela per day. Could you find workers who work for less than a sela a day? Can you find it? Of course you can find it. Of course you can find it. Absolutely. So, it's fascinating. Also, you see it. It's in the Baruch Hashem, we just started putting up the stone on the new building. So the stone chevra, like the masonry chevra, is a separate chevra. So when they started, the guy in charge of the chevra said, he's very sweet. He's like, "Rabbi, I know you're in a big rush." He's like, "We will work 7 days a week. We'll work 7 days a week." So I have to say, I never had a Yetzer Hara to work on Shabbos. I mean, I work on Shabbos, so I guess it's different for me. I never had a Yetzer Hara. This is the first I had a Yetzer Hara to work on Shabbos. So, but it's fascinating. But yet, the other chavras, unheard of. 4 o'clock, they start very early. But again, there's a range. Starts in the morning, ends late afternoon. No Shabbos, no Sunday yet. The masonry chavra, they're ready to go 7 days a week. It's fascinating. So the idea the Gemara is highlighting over here is that halacha l'maisa, they're not working on Shabbos. I just want to put that out there. Right? So the idea over here is that when it comes to the labor market, so there's different valuations. So now the Gemara says, okay, so then what's the difference between the reisha and the sefer? Remember again, I will say the Gemara said that the first case in the employment agreement was us. So what was the first case? The first case is I'm hiring Ruvain now in Nisan at a rate of 30 sela. One sela. No, sorry. It wasn't a dinar. Sorry, 1 dinar per day for 30 days, right? And the Gemara says that case is aser. And the second case, because why? Because in the harvest season he could command a rate of 1 sela a day. But yet, case number 2 was if I hire him from now, then halacha l'maisa it's fine. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. If you're telling me that there is this range in employment amounts, then halacha l'maisa, why is the reisha aser? To which the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you why. The Gemara says, "Ma'ishna reisha, ma'ishna seifa. Reisha delo ka'avid behedja mehashta mechseki agar natar. Seifa de ka'avid behedja mehashta lo mechseki agar natar." So the Gemara says, you're right. This is really just an appearance. There is no issue. There is no actual halachic issue over here. But rather, what do you have? You have an optics issue. That's the real situation. So in case number 1, where I'm hiring him now in Nisan to work in Tammuz, and ultimately, again, I'm contracting him at a lower rate, and everyone knows that he could go ahead and get a higher rate later, it looks like a ribis transaction. So I'm giving him 40 dinar right now, and remember I'll say, when I get 40 days of labor, when I give 30 days, when I give him 30 dinar now, and I get 30 days of labor later on, how much is 30 days of labor worth in Tammuz? How much is 30 days worth of labor worth in Tammuz? It's worth 30 slime, which is certainly much more than 30 dinar. So the problem just is now again, is that a ribis transaction? Is it ribis? No, why not? Because people hire themselves out at different rates. That's right. That's common. So what's the issue? The issue is it looks like ribis. It looks like I'm lending Ruvain money now. I'm lending him 30 dinar, and because I have to wait to get paid back, I'm getting back, let's call it 100 dinar, because the value of the service that he's providing for me is 100 dinar. So again, it's not ribis. But it looks like ribis. In case number 2, because the employment is starting mehayom, mehashta, therefore again there's no ribis issue, or no even optics of ribis. Okay, beautiful. Let's go back there. The Gemara says, remember again, we'll say, what did the Mishnah say? The Mishnah spoke about the following case, that if I'm selling Ruvain, if Lashon of the Mishnah was if I'm selling Ruvain wheat, if I'm selling him wheat, and the wheat was mechuber lekarka, v'talash kol shehu, and Ruvain uprooted any of the wheat, kana, he acquires the wheat. Okay, so now the Gemara says that case doesn't make any sense. Mishum de kalash kol shehu kana. I don't understand. Because Reuven uprooted some wheat, therefore he acquired all of the wheat. Why does that work? In other words, how does uprooting a stalk of wheat acquire all of the wheat for Reuven? To which the Gemara says, no. Amar Rav Sheshes says, what's the case? So the Amar lei yafa yipa lecha karka kol shu the kanema koma shala. The way the kingdom was structured was, I said to Reuven, do some type of improvement on the land, and through the improvement that you perform on the land, acquire everything that is on it. That was the way the kingdom was structured. Therefore, as soon as Reuven does a quote-unquote improvement in this case, uprooting some of the wheat, he acquires everything. Incredible. Very interesting case here. So listen to this. I'm selling Reuven wine or oil. And now watch this. So let's say we agreed on a price. And then sometime over the course of the transaction, the value changed. It became more valuable, less valuable, appreciated, depreciated. So what do I do? So listen to this. So now, of course, the shaila becomes, who bears the appreciation or depreciation? That's the shaila. So the Gemara says, Im ad shalom nismali hamida lemocher. So listen to this. So the Gemara says, if they were still measuring out the produce, let's say I'm selling Reuven a barrel of wine, right? So the way it works, I'm selling him a small barrel, and we're measuring that off of the large barrel. So if we're still measuring the wine, and let's say the price of wine goes up, or for that matter goes down, it doesn't really matter. So the halacha is lemocher. Then I bear that responsibility. Since we're in the midst of measuring, that means Reuven hasn't fully acquired it. Therefore, any appreciation or depreciation comes to me. But once the wine has been fully measured, then any appreciation or depreciation is borne by the buyer. What if there was a broker? So let's say again, I give over my wine to the broker, to Shimon, and Shimon is the one who's selling it on my behalf to Reuven. Then what's the halacha? Then nishbara chavis nishbar l'sirsur. If the barrel breaks, then ultimately again the middleman, the broker, bears the responsibility. Again, we'll see exactly. Look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam is like in the wide lines, 2, 4, 6, about 8 lines into the wide lines. Haya sirsur beinehem v'amida shalo. Now we're talking about a case where the measuring utensils belong to him. Now we're talking about a case where now it's interesting. Rashbam says that often the way brokers would work is a broker would acquire the merchandise and then he would sell it at a profit. So what that sounds like is the moment that Shimon the merchant comes along, I am out of the picture. He buys it from me, I'm out. So essentially, the sirsur, the broker, he's the new seller. He replaces me in this entire transaction. So therefore the Gemara says, we'll see more about him. If the barrel breaks, ultimately he bears the loss. The broker bears the loss. Now this is very interesting. When you are selling liquid, now especially liquid with a thicker consistency, that's why it gives wine and oil, chayiv lahatiflo shalosh tipin. This is fascinating. So if you can imagine, and this probably, it could illustrate this either with wine or oil, but imagine for a moment, I'm selling Reuven a jug of oil. A jug of olive oil. So what's that? So I have a larger barrel, and I'm measuring off a jug. The Mishnah says that after you finish pouring the jug, you have to try to go ahead and pour 3 more times in order to get any additional droplets of oil for Reuven. Right, so I have an obligation as the merchant to tip the utensil. Good. Move the utensil 3 more times to get the last 3 droplets. V'chayv lahatiflo shalosh tipin. Incredible. Look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam says, "La'achar irei hashemen va'yayin chayv od lahativ shalosh teva min hadabok bedof ne'akli." The assumption is with oil and with their wine as well. Their wine, and I will say, often the wine that they were selling was wine concentrate. Right? Remember again, people would dilute their own wine, so you can imagine wine concentrate is thicker. So some of it, and like oil, would adhere to the walls. So if you're selling someone, and I'm pouring from my utensil, the seller's utensil, into their utensil, I have to make sure to tip the kli 3 more times to get anything that may be adhering to the sides of my utensil that may be rightfully theirs. Okay, now after I do those 3 tips, here kina umitzis harizeh shel mochar. Now afterwards, you can imagine. So let's say again, I'm selling Ruvain oil. So I'm selling him a lug of oil. So he's bringing like a lug utensil. I'm taking from my large utensil. I'm pouring it, or I'm pouring it into my own lug utensil I'm giving to him. I have to tip the oil 3 times in order to make sure that I get out the droplets. Now after I do that, so let's say now I have the kli upright, what inevitably ends up happening? Some additional oil or wine pools at the bottom of my utensil. Who does that belong to? So the Mishnah says, that's mine. That's the seller's. Right? That doesn't go back to the buyer. Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Erev Shabbos im chashecha pater. I'm sorry, v'achen v'ni einu chayv lahatif, shalosh tipin. Now the chenvini, I will say the chenvini is the shopkeeper. He's not obligated to do this thing with the 3 droplets, the 3 drops, right? Now the Rashbam points out, why is the chenvini not obligated to do that? Taratu b'mechiraso. So we'll say a chenvini, a shopkeeper, is constantly busy, right? Customers in and out. That 3 droplet thing really requires a lot of time. Right? You got to sit there, you got to do it, right? And then you have to allow it to collect and do it again, allow it to collect, do it again, right? It's not like boom, boom, boom. It's once, wait. So it's time. The chenvini is always busy with customers. So therefore the Mishnah says the chenvini is not obligated to do this 3 droplet thing. Rabbi Yehuda says, Erev Shabbos im chashecha pater. Rabbi Yehuda says, Erev Shabbos. How incredible is this? Erev Shabbos, and we're learning an Erev Shabbos Gemara. Erev Shabbos, right? Close to Erev Shabbos im chashecha means late on Erev Shabbos, you're pater. Okay, so I have to see what Rabbi Yehuda is saying in just a moment. So Gemara says, 1 second. Hamid demands. Let's talk about this, right? So remember again, the Mishnah spoke about appreciation or depreciation of produce in the midst of a transaction. And the shaila is who gets, right, or who bears the appreciation or depreciation. So the Mishnah made it sound like, what does it depend on? Where are you in the process? If you're still measuring out, then appreciation and depreciation is borne by the seller. If you finished measuring it out, then it's borne by the purchaser. The Gemara says, 1 second. Hamida demand, whose measuring utensil are you using? Right? We just spoke about this in the last Gemara, that depending on whose measuring utensil you're using, that determines who owns the produce in the course of the transaction. So the Gemara says, if we're talking about, if you're using the measuring utensil of the purchaser, then as soon as that merchandise goes into the measuring utensil, belongs to the seller. Belongs to the purchaser. So the Gemara says, rather, we're talking about a case where we're talking about the utensil of the seller. If that's the case, then even if you finished measuring, it still belongs to the seller. So what's going on over here? You're right, b'midas sirsur. Actually, you're talking about the case where we're using the measuring utensil of the broker. So the measuring utensil belongs to neither seller nor buyer. In that kind of case, as it's being measured, the produce still belongs to the seller, and once it's finished being measured, the produce belongs to the buyer. So Rav says, 1 second. But since the Seifa introduced the case of the broker, makes it sound like the Reisha is not talking about a broker case. To which the Gemara says, you're right, here we go. Reisha b'mida below sirsur, Seifa b'sirsur atzmo. The first case of the Mishnah is talking about a situation where what? I'm selling produce to Ruvain, and I'm using Shimon, the broker's measuring utensils, but Shimon is not around. So the utensil belongs to the sirsur, but we're not actually transacting this through the sirsur. The Seifa, the second case, is talking about where Shimon, the broker, is actually affecting the transaction. So we'll say, therefore, again, halacha number 1 that comes out of the Mishnah is if I'm selling Ruvain produce and I'm using a utensil that doesn't belong to me or Ruvain, right? It belongs to Shimon, a third party, and now the produce appreciates and depreciates. If the appreciation and depreciation takes place while I'm measuring out the produce, then halacha l'maisa, that is borne by me, the seller. But once I finished measuring out the produce, then any appreciation or depreciation will ultimately be borne by Ruvain, the purchaser. Now, of course, if we're using my utensils or Ruvain's utensils, that goes back to the previous sugya. So if it's my utensils, I own it. Ruvain's utensils, he owns it. Okay, let's go back there. Herkino mitzis harish lamocher. So remember, the Mishnah said, after I sell Ruvain the oil or the wine, I'm obligated to pour off the kli 3 more times, right, to get the residue. But after I do that, whatever settles on the bottom of the utensil is mine. So the Gemara says, listen to this. When Rabbi Lazar went to Eretz Yisrael, he found Zeiri. Amrle mi kan tana da'asne rav midos. Is there anyone here who ever learned the section of midos, right, of measurements with Rav? Okay, the Gemara says, Achvi Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi. So he pointed out Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi. Amrle. So Zeiri went over to him and he said to him as follows. He says, Amalei, Maika Kashilacha, what's your problem? Disnan, Hirkina Umeitzis Harish Lamochers. Right, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, I'm selling oil to Ruvain, so I'm selling him a lug of oil. So what I pour out the lug. After I pour out the lug of oil, I say, so what do I do? Next step, tilt the utensil 3 times to get off any additional residue that's adhering to the walls. But after I do that, any additional oil that settles on the bottom of my kli, who does it belong to? Belongs to me, the seller. All right, Hari Shalochar. Amud Beis, here's the problem. V'hatanan we learned, so we'll say this is actually quite fascinating. V'hatanan we learned, Herkina umeitza harezu truma. Ooh. Watch this. So we'll say, let's say now I decided I am dedicating a lug of oil to the Beis HaMikdash. So what do? I go ahead and I have a lug of oil and I'm pouring it off into another utensil, right? So I dedicate it as truma, right? I'm giving this to the kohen. Or I have truma oil and I'm pouring it off into another utensil in order to go ahead and give it to the kohen. So now what's the halacha? I pour off the utensil. And I both say, now let's say I pour it off and then through the utensil and more oil pools on the bottom of the utensil. What's the halacha? That is truma. And therefore again you have to pour it into the rest of the truma oil. And I will say, now this is a kasha on us. Why? Because in our Mishnah, so remember, let's go back to our Mishnah. I'm selling Ruvain a lug of oil. So I take a container of my oil, I pour off, and let's say I have a lug container. So I pour off into Ruvain's container, right? And I go ahead, or whatever, into a secondary container, and I pour off a lug of oil. So I pour off all the oil. Then, okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is my obligation. Step 2, 3 additional pours, right, to get off anything adhering. But then I will say, we know what's going to happen. I put the utensil down, 5 minutes later I come back, and what do I see? There's some additional oil that's pooled on the bottom of the utensil. What did the Mishnah say? Who does that belong to? Me, the seller, which means, another way of saying, that oil that pooled back on the bottom is not part of the transaction. The Gemara says, contrast that with the Truma case, where the Gemara says, if you're pouring off Truma oil, so right, I pour it off, 3 pours, any oil that pools on the bottom of my utensil is still Truma oil. So that contradicts our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says, after I pour the initial pour and the 3 additional pours, anything else that pools is not part of the transaction, but yet by Truma, it is part of the transaction. So what's going on over here? So the Gemara says, it's just 2 different cases. The difference is that when Reuven is buying the oil, right, both of us know that at the end of this transaction, some oil is going to pool on the bottom of my utensil, right? I know it, Reuven knows it. Reuven, so to speak, is miyayish. Reuven doesn't care about it. It's not the pshat that the oil that pools on the bottom of my utensil is not part of the transaction. Technically it is. But what? But at the end of the day, Reuven is miyayish on it. He's not worried about it. He just forgets about it. He gives up on it. And therefore, again, but that is an institutionalized yeyosh. It's understood almost that every single purchaser knows that amount is there, but Allah l'maisa it's negligible, and therefore again the buyer gives up on it. Masha'inkin by truma, it still retains the identity of truma. Take a look at the top Rashbam. Mishum yeyosh bailim shalokeach misyayish umakbid oso mitzui mipnei shetorech lo lahamtin ad Sheikh matzah. Aval truma lo shaykh yeyosh. Demikol makom truma hi vasru lezarim. So we'll say, no. What's interesting is, remember, Reuven's buying his oil. It's going to take after the initial pour and then the additional 3 pours. It's going to take a little bit of time for the rest of the oil to kind of gather there on the bottom. So the assumption that Rashbam says is Reuven's not going to wait around. Right, he's not going to sit there while the oil once again collects and pulls at the bottom. So whether it's 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it is, there's a time value of money. Time. Well, there's a time value, that is true also. But time itself has a value, and therefore it's not worth Reuven's time to go ahead and wait there for the oil. Therefore he's miyayish. So we'll say it's very profound on a variety of levels in terms of the utilization of our time, right? That at the end of the day, time, we know that money has a value, but time has the greatest value, and how careful we have to be with what we spend our time on. So therefore the Gemara says the assumption over here is, even though that oil that collects on the bottom belongs to Reuven, it's not worth Reuven's time to be able to go ahead and wait there to collect it. Therefore he's miyayish. By truma, there's no yeyosh. There's no yeyosh by truma. Remember, I say, in order for yeyosh to occur, what do you need? An identified owner. By truma, it's the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash as an entity doesn't have yeyosh, and therefore again that oil that pulls back on the bottom belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. So that's really quite fascinating. Fine. So we'll say, so remember again. Now let's look at the end of the Mishnah. So the end of the Mishnah said 2 statements. The chenveni, the shopkeeper, is not obligated to do that three droplets over there. Why not? What was the logic? He's very busy. He's always dealing with customers. If he has to wait at the end of every transaction, because also remember again, in order to do that 3 additional pours, right? What do you need to do? What do you have to do? You have to wait, right? In other words, we know how this works, right? Oil, you pour off the majority of it, then you have to wait for it to collect, pour again. Wait for it to collect, pour again. Wait for it to collect, pour again. That's time. The chenveni chick-chak, right? He's got customers to service. And at the end of the day, if he doesn't service, he's going to have a problem. So therefore, the chenveni is pater. Now, Rabbi Huda then came along, and Rabbi Huda says, on Erev Shabbos, he's pater. So the shaila is, what is Rabbi Huda commenting on? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Huda aresha koi ulekula ol dilma asefa koi ulechumra. So this is fascinating. When Rabbi Huda says, right, so what is Rabbi Huda commenting on? So there's 2 possible places we can put Rabbi Huda's comment. Either Rabbi Huda is saying is like this. The Mishnah said that you have to do 3 pours. So maybe Rabbi Huda is saying that on Erev Shabbos, you're pater. On Erev Shabbos, you don't have to do the 3 pours, because Erev Shabbos has even a greater urgency, greater rush, therefore you don't have to do it. That means Reisha. Or maybe he's going on the Seifa, that when the Mishnah said that the chenveni, the shopkeeper, doesn't have to do the additional 3 pours, maybe that's only when? Maybe that's only on Erev Shabbos. Right? But during the rest of the week, see, therefore Rabbi Huda is being machmir. Rabbi Huda is saying rest of the week, even the chenveni has to do it, but Erev Shabbos, where business is a little bit brisker, right? Therefore, again, he doesn't have to do it. So which one is he saying? To which the Gemara says, Tashma, the Sanyo, Rabbi Huda Omer Erev Shabbos im chashecha, chenveni pater, mepnei shechenveni taret. So here it's explicit. Rabbi Huda says, normally the shopkeeper does have to do the 3 pours. When's the exception? Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos, and I will say this is very interesting because Erev Shabbos is very busy, which also means that as the consumer, it's important to understand, if you do your shopping early, so now again, what's the benefit of doing your shopping early? You're going to get the 3 pours. But if you are a last minute yid, right, and you are doing your shopping late on Erev Shabbos, just understand that halacha l'maisa, you're not getting your additional 3 pours. Which I both say, it's so interesting. You ever have this type of situation where you're running late for something, and suddenly again you are angry at everyone else on the road, right? Why is this person not moving that? And there's an incredible Mosar Haskell. Just because you can't get your act together doesn't mean that everyone else has to accommodate you and move faster. In other words, and this is a tremendous Musar Haskell, because we do this all the time, right? I'm running late. Erev Shabbos, I'm running late in my house, right? So what happens? So now it's, come on, why isn't this ready? Why isn't this? Hello? Where were you an hour ago? Where an hour ago. So now you're deciding to run late. You're deciding to suddenly go ahead and cook filet mignon 2 hours before Shabbos. Where the heck were you the entire day? So now don't start getting angry and upset at everyone else that this one's not ready, that one's not ready. Understand, when you run late, Rabbi say that's why again timeliness is one of the most important midos, because when you run late, generally for most people, running late leads to a breakdown of a whole other bunch of things. Rarely do people run late and still remain polite, right? Generally, if you're running late, you're harried, you're anxious, and there's a whole breakdown in midos. You're yelling, you're screaming, you're angry, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu, why do bad things happen to good people, right? You're angry at God, you're angry at people, you're angry at everything. Why? Because again, it's anxiety provoking, right? It's incredible. I'll say that's why timeliness. Right? There really is godliness in timeliness. The beauty of the Rebbeinu Shalom, one thing about Hakadosh Baruch Hu, one of the most incredible midos about Hakadosh Baruch Hu is Rebbeinu Shalom is timely. He's timely. He knows exactly what to do, when to do it. And as Tzelem Elokim, it is so important for us to try to be timely in our lives as well, in everything. There's so much more Yishuv Hadas. There's so much more. Life is so much calmer when you're not in a rush, whether that's to the meeting in the morning or whether it's coming into Shabbos. Right? We all know this. When you fly into Shabbos, it's a different Shabbos. It's not good. It's not good. Kabbalah Shabbos is different. Mincha is different. Everything is different. Go into Shabbos benachos, and it is possible. It is possible. You just have to be organized. You have to be organized, you have to be thought out, and you have to plan ahead. So the Gemara says, because if you're going to fly in, just understand you're not getting those 3 extra pours. You're just not getting it. You're not getting it. Why? Because you're deciding to run late. At least you have a nice chenveni who's going in and staying open, but it's not as problem to give you the 3 extra pours. Be timely, come earlier, you'll get your 3 pours. Come late, you're not getting your 3 pours. And I will say, a profound Gemara for us to learn on Erev Shabbos. I've mentioned this many, many times. Rabbi Soloveitchik, Zichron Tzadik Livracha, pointed out that one of the things that he missed the most from his youth, he said in America, there are many Shomrei Shabbos. But one of the things that he missed most from his youth, he said growing up, people were Shomer Erev Shabbos. They were Shomer Erev Shabbos. And what does it mean to be a Shomer Erev Shabbos? That come Thursday night already, it's time to get ready for Shabbos. It's time to get ready for Shabbos. There's hachonos, and the day is different. And even if I have to work, so I have all of my same responsibilities, at the end of the day, I structure my day differently. I was saying, there's absolutely no need to be late for Mincha on Erev Shabbos. There's no need to fly in to Kabbalah Shabbos. Okay, sometimes extraneous, there's an ones. Okay, something happens. Sometimes person runs. Of course, those kind of things happen. But if my life is like that every Erev Shabbos, then I'm not I might be a great Shomer Shabbos, but there's something missing in my Shmiras Erev Shabbos. The golden life is to be Gabbal. So you know what the Gadol says? If I become a Shomer Erev Shabbos, then I could have a shtickle 2-day Shabbos every single week. And who wouldn't want a 2-day Shabbos? To be able to have a beautiful and uplifting and heilige Erev Shabbos, a beautiful Shabbos Kodesh, structure our lives, structure our days in a way that allow us to observe not only Shabbos, but Erev Shabbos as well. Mishnah. Hasholech espino eitzel chenveni. So what's the interesting case over here? I send my son to the shopkeeper, upundian biyada, with some money as well. So I send him to the shopkeeper to buy something. Or the Gemara says, umadad lo be'isr shemen. So also, now watch this. So I send him, let's say, with a dinar. A dinar, right, is 2 isers. I send him with a dinar. Now this is a minor. I'm sending a minor, right? With money and with utensils. So I send him, and the shopkeeper gives him the oil and also gives him the change. So I'll say, if my son on the way loses the money, on the way home loses the money or breaks the utensil, so the shopkeeper, the chenveni, is chayiv. Now why is the chenveni chayiv? So what the Mishnah is saying is, chenveni, you should know better than to entrust a flask of oil and money with a kid. With a kid, what are you giving it to a minor? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Huda poter. Rabbi Huda says, absolutely not. The chenveni is poter. Shalmanas kein shalchu. Rabbi Huda says, what are you talking about? I, the father, am the one who sent my kid. I sent them with money. I sent them with a jug. So I'm responsible. So how could the chenveni be responsible? Rabbi Huda, with Rabbi Huda, bisman shatzluch is biad atinok. Umadad chenveni lesocha shechenveni poter. But the Chum agree with Rabbi Huda in a case where let's say the child is the one who is holding the flask, and the chenveni just pours the wine in, or the oil in, then again, that in that case the chenveni is patur. All right, so let's analyze. So bishlama be'isr v'shem b'hapligi. So we'll say, now watch this. So now here's the case. I'm sending my son with a dinar and the flask, and I'm telling him, go get oil. So now the kid's supposed to come back with two things: a flask of oil and change. The change is in Isser. So what's the machlokes? The Rabbanan sabri la'aduye shadri. So what's this incredible? The Rabbanan say that when I send my minor child, right? And again, remember, as we point out, minor child is not one of your children who you love less than the others, right? But minor child means a young child below the age of bar mitzvah, so below the age of responsibility, right? So when I send the kid to a shopkeeper, what am I doing? I'm telling shopkeeper, hey, I need stuff. I do not mean for him to give it to my kid. What I mean for him is to send someone. I want delivery, right? Uber Eats, go ahead and send the stuff to my house. Don't send it back with my kid, because I don't trust my kid to go ahead and bring back the money and bring back the oil. So therefore, again, it's like a message to the shopkeeper. Rabbi Huda Savar, the Shadur de Shadre. Rabbi Huda holds, on the other hand, no, when I send my kid with the money and with the utensil, what am I telling him? I'm telling him, send it back with my kid. So we'll stop over here for today. So again, this is the fundamental machlokes. The Gemara says, sorry. Right, okay, fine. We'll stop over for today. We'll pick up with this tomorrow. Shkayach, everyone. All right, Chavra and Zoom, have a good Shabbos.